G'day guys and gal. The Necrons are often considered to be the most powerful faction in the setting. Their technology is obscene, they technically cannot die, and they don't have issues with morale. They're also extremely numerous and use their gods as Pokemon. So why does it seem like they literally do nothing? Well, aside from being a bunch of grumpy old men that want everyone to stay off their lawn, as well as their obscene amounts of infighting, the Necrons have actually started something that, if it was to succeed, would kill the Tyranids, Chaos, the Eldar, and most of humanity in a very short span of time. Because why not go for gold? This project, started by the Silent King, Lord of the Necrons, is the Pariah Nexus, something that seems like a massive plot point, but then now is kind of getting ignored to make way for 10th edition. But trust me when I say this, the Nexus is still up and running. Before we get started, it's nearly Christmas, and I give you the gift of lore and hentai. In return, I simply ask for your subscription. It's free, easy, and tickles my competitive pickle. Today we'll go over the Pariah Nexus, what it does, how it works, and the lore tidbits surrounding it. We'll also discuss what the other factions are doing to try stop it, and how I think this plot point will conclude. We can also discuss a bit about the Pariah Nexus TV show on Warhammer Plus as well. Now let's get into it. The lore for the Pariah Nexus actually goes back a very long time, about 60 million years ago to the War in Heaven. Long story short, the Necrons, backed up by the gods of the physical universe, the Catan, engaged in a war with the Eldar, Orcs, and a bunch of other races backed up by the Old Ones, the gods of the spiritual universe. The war went very badly for everyone, with the warp getting heavily corrupted from being abused as a weapon by the Old Ones, whilst the Necrons laid waste to thousands of worlds and drove many species to extinction. The Necrons' final gambit to permanently win the war was to try and use special Blackstone Necron pylons to create null zones that terminated the warp in specific areas. The immediate effect was no more warp powers or warp entities in those areas. However, over time, people with souls in those areas would become more and more depressed, unwell, and drained, overall just weaker than a road-killed sloth. They would then probably eventually die, or at least enter a catatonic soulless state, in which case their depleted soul would then not be able to go anywhere, hence they would face oblivion, which to be honest sounds better than your soul getting fucked to death and devoured by demons, which is what usually happens when you die in 40k, so yeah, honestly could be an upgrade. The Necrons tested this technology on the Eye of Terror, a hole in real space that led to the warp that the Old Ones accidentally tore open during their abuse of the warp. The test was a huge success, with the Eye of Terror being shut. However, before the Necron pylons could be deployed across the galaxy, the Old Ones were finally driven to extinction, and the Necrons rose up against the Catan, who had been brutal overlords until this point. The civil war between the Necrons and the Catan weakened the shit out of the Skelly Boys, so they went into a 60 million year coma, allowing the Eldar Empire to rule the galaxy for that time. In his shame, the Silent King, Lord of the Necrons, destroyed his command module that gave him total control of all Necrons, before then exiling himself to the outer reaches of the galaxy for the next 60 million years. There would be no rest for Zazaric. In the current setting, the Necrons have been waking up. However, with the command module gone, they don't give a fuck about working together anymore, with many Necrons having personal beefs with other Necron dynasties, hence they have been more or less civil warring upon awakening, with the occasional battle with the other races. They still consider themselves to be the most powerful race, since the Eldar and the Orcs, their two old nemesises, have been massively reduced in strength, and the Imperium is seen as more or less a big joke by the Necrons. However, the Silent King, who's been watching the galaxy this whole time, was like, bruh, if we don't get our shit together, we are fucked. The Silent King saw the Tyranids as the ultimate threat, as he wishes for his people to return to flesh and blood, and would need a lot of biomass from sentient races to do so, biomass that the Tyranids are trying to consume. Hence, the Silent King was actually a pretty cool guy, teaming up with the Blood Angels to beat the Nids. However, with the opening of the Great Rift, he's cracked the shits and said, "No more Mr. Nice Guy." Realizing that both the Tyranids and Chaos rely entirely on the warp, he decided to revive the Necrons' old project and attempt to nullify the warp galaxy-wide. Sure, this would also doom the Orcs, Eldar, and humans, but the Silent King sees that as an absolute win, as he could use their still living but comatose soulless bodies as the perfect vessels to reverse biotransference with. Hence, he brought his dynasty and many of his vassal dynasties together and built the Pariah Nexus. A small region of space was now free of the warp, with his ambition being to grow this null zone to slowly but steadily encompass the galaxy. The structure of the Nexus is a multiple solar system spanning network of worlds that have big-ass pylons on them, that then surround a Necron Dyson sphere in the center. To help him with this massive undertaking, the Silent King recruited Illuminor Seraz, as he needed the mad Necron scientists to build the Nexus, as well as figure out how to reverse biotransference. As a note, the Pariah Nexus was a name given to the null zone by the Imperium, as a reference to pariahs, blanks, who are people with auras that nullify the warp around them. However, Gilliman became aware that a region of space was getting a bit funky, hence he sent battle group Khalides of the Indomitus Crusade to go check it out, and boy oh boy, did Khalides cop a hell of an ass whooping. The Necrons were finally united in purpose, hence were overpowered as fuck. The Imperials died in the millions, as even the efforts of the Death Watch weren't enough. To make matters worse, the Null Zone was terrible for morale, as an effect called the Stilling begun to materialize. Guardsmen would have unexpected panic attacks mid-battle, with some even going catatonic. Even the Space Marines and Tech Priests were having issues, getting big-ass headaches. Suffering loss after loss, even just against the forces of Illuminor Seraz, like the Silent King wasn't even involved yet, the Imperium decided to get a little bit heretical. They allowed Inquisitor Draxus, a radical who became an expert Necron hunter due to learning from the Elder and using their technology, as well as Ephriel Stern, a sister of battle who has become a demigod and is on the Inquisition's hit list for being too spicy. These two heretical heroes were given command of the battle group to do their thing. Draxus was able to use her Elder tech heresy to gain an advantage and begin winning key battles on the Necron worlds, while Stern was able to use her powers of faith to overcome the Null Zone and access her full demigod power to carry the day. Faith soon became a weapon for the Imperium, who could now use warp-like powers despite being in the Pariah Nexus, something that fascinated but also greatly disturbed the Necrons. In one conflict, Draxus was able to push deep into a Necron world, and as she was being surrounded, she smashed open a Catan Shard prison, causing the Catan to begin rampaging against the Necrons for imprisoning him. After all, the Catan fucking hate the Necrons now, since going from literal god to Pokemon is pretty humiliating. To say thank you, the Catan teleported Draxus and Ament to safety, which is a pretty cool detail. However, just as it seemed like the Imperium was getting the upper hand, the Silent King entered the war and has been basically unstoppable, clapping the fuck out of the Imperial forces wherever he finds them. It does show his personality though. He always offers them the chance to surrender and is always impressed when they refuse. If the Imperials fight well, he will even allow a few of them to retreat. However, on the other side of this coin, any acts of dishonor are punished severely. When a Space Marine captain wanted to challenge a Necron Overlord, the Necron Overlord halted his army's advance so they could engage in an honor duel. However, the Imperials then used this halt to counterattack. Seeing this, the Silent King raged and basically turbo cum-blasted the Imperial force from orbit with his megaship, taking out a moon in the process. So overall, it's kind of hard to call the Silent King a villain. He's honorable, has a plan to take out the Nids and Chaos, and only wants to genocide the other races to save his own. Not because he thinks it's funny. Looking at you, Imperium. The war has entered into a bit of a stalemate with the Imperium on the back foot. However, many of the Necrons have gone back to infighting, which has slowed the Necrons' counterattack, and Gilliman has said he wants to go check it out personally, so we may get a G-Man vs Silent King showdown. Maybe the Lion will get involved as well, who knows. Overall though, it's a cool plot point which makes the Necrons an actual threat for once. As for what the other races are doing about it, fuck all. A small force of Elder is supporting the Imperials, but Chaos doesn't seem to know or care about the Nexus, despite how badly it would fuck them up. The Nids also haven't tried to take a shot at it, which is understandable since any Nid that entered the Null Zone would lose connection to the hive mind and go feral. I'm hoping the conclusion of the Pariah Nexus plot involves a massive multi-faction war, as it does seem to involve pretty much everyone, except maybe the Tau. As for the Pariah Nexus TV show, it's basically a self-contained story of one of the many engagements taking place within the Pariah Nexus, as a small group of Imperial survivors try to take on Illuminor Seraz. It's actually a sequel to the 9th edition trailer and features the same characters, so that's pretty cool. Alongside a few others such as a Salamander, which is a nice shake-up from the usual ultra wank that all the animations seem to have. As for the conclusion, I don't really see how there is any force in the galaxy that could push through the Silent King and destroy his Pariah Nexus, especially since multiple Pariah Nexuses are starting to pop up across the galaxy. However, they are not too hard to contain. I would really love for the war to involve Chaos, as that was the original purpose of the Pariah Nexus. Having the Necrons as these anti-hero types who are genuinely able to hurt Chaos would be cool. I mean, fuck it. Let them shut the Eye of Terror again. The Great Rift is the new big scary thing. With how powerful Chaos is at the moment with the Arcs of Omen, and whatever they're going to do after technically winning the Arcs of Omen event, the Imperium could use some soulless robotic buddies to help keep them in the game. Or just say fuck it and let the Lion and G-Man 2v1 the Silent King. I'd take that as well. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then pick up some Majorkill merch. There is only one more week before this drop is gone for good, so get in now. Hit the subscribe button and hit the real subscribe button for more nullifying content. Join the Discord for more memes and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.